Well, hello everyone, and welcome in to Touched by the Tentacles of the Watchtower. We're so glad that you could come in here tonight and be with us. Now, if this is your first time coming into the six screens, we welcome you, and I know you're going to find it very fascinating. We have a woman, she's a former Jehovah's Witness. Her name is Anne Marie, and she's coming to us from Northern California. So we're looking forward to her program. It's called Touched by the Tentacles of the Watchtower. Hello, Anne Marie, you're on there with us?
Hello, my brother Rick, right here with you.
All righty. Well, anyways, Anne Marie, from what I understand, I believe tonight we're going to be talking about jobs in the Watchtower. Now, you say, well, what kind of a subject is that? Well, all of us, we had to live our life when we were Jehovah's Witnesses around Watchtower dictates. Some jobs we couldn't take. They would prefer we had a very menial job. They would prefer that we could always be at the meetings, never have to work overtime, never had to work on Saturdays and Sundays. That's what they would prefer. So we're going to be asking the audience tonight about that. And I think it's going to be very fascinating, Anne Marie. Yes.
Yes, my brother, as always, you pick a good subject, and I really appreciate that I can ask you because you give us all things to think about. And, brother, you are so correct. Watchtower really did dictate every facet and choice of our lives. So true.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm going to step on the background. I'm going to have you. I'm going to have you take it away.
Well, thank you, my brother. I want to welcome everyone into today's show, Touched by the Tentacles of the Watchtower, and weren't we all, to some degree or another, most of us quite thoroughly touched by the tentacles of the Watchtower, now we controlled every facet of our lives. Today is Six Screen Saturday. It is January 28th, 2022. And as our dear faithful brother Rick mentioned, we were thinking of focusing on the topic of what did you do for a job when you were in Watchtower? I don't know about you, but I had very menial jobs like house cleaning. I hated having to clean rich people's toilets and their coochie hairs off the bottom of the toilet and their splattered urine. What kind of job was that? I could have had a college education and been a teacher like I wanted to be, but Watchtower told me to put Jehovah first. Anyone want to chime in at any time? You go ahead. Feel free.
Hi, Anne Marie.
Hello, Guy. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I just thought I'd call in because I may not have that menial job per se, but regarding jobs, when I was in sign language, I used to work at the Goodwill plant doing secure document shredding, and I was pretty good at it. I also did some cardboard baling, do some paper sorting, etc. And you got to understand, this was nonprofit charity, so to speak, and it was at the Goodwill Industries of Southwest Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, it lasted from October 2007 until March 2012. It ended on my part because I was the one who was having self-sabotaging behavior. It had nothing to do with my behavior was getting very erratic at the time.
Guy, this is not a therapy session. What does this have to do with how Watchtower? Well, I need you to be aware of what you're talking about. Therapy sessions are for being with a therapist. I understand you have those issues. I do. But you took this job at Goodwill, Guy, and I'd like to ask you, did obeying, let's just say the word obeying, did obeying Watchtower have anything to do with your taking this job at Goodwill?
Very little, if any. It was mostly helping out with the sign language field. It was mostly helping with pioneer schools and helping out with the deaf ministry and all of that. I used to save up to go to the assemblies. That you can say played a part on it. Always having to ask off of work and stuff on certain days, like being asked off at sign language conventions.
Okay,
That
let's
played
get
a
to the
part.
subject. Guy, sorry. Guy, are you saying, I want to make sure I understand you, are you saying that basically you were having in mind saving money so that you could attend conventions and be part of the sign language type of thing? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that was it. At first, the sign language field it had some good times and stuff, but there were some things I didn't like in the sign language field and
Okay,
stuff.
let's stop. Take a breath. Thank you. That was a yes
Sorry about that.
or no question. No worries, no worries. So, Guy, I have another question for you. By any chance, did anybody in Watchtower pull you aside and say something to you in the effect that they didn't think it was right that you were working for Goodwill?
Nobody told me about that per se, but about how I didn't know any better back then about getting called. My sister went to college to do respiratory therapy.
Okay, Guy, let's stop right there. Stop. Let's just cut it right there and let's just stick to the subject. That was a yes, no, I don't remember kind of question. I was wondering if somebody had talked to you, because I don't know if you are aware of this, Guy, but a lot of people who did have jobs, whatever job there was, if it wasn't a menial job like house cleaning, like I had to do, they would pull you aside and tell you something that you were doing wrong and why you shouldn't be doing that job. And with Goodwill, Salvation Army, any of those, St. Vincent de Paul, a lot of times brothers and sisters who worked at these types of charitable organizations were counseled as if they were doing something wrong. That's why I asked you that question. Thank you so much for chiming in, Guy. I just don't want to derail. No worries,
I'm sorry
don't worry.
about that.
It's
Salvation
okay,
Army, I understand because of religious purposes, but Goodwill, I was never talked to about that.
Okay,
I was never talked to about Goodwill.
Okay, well, I am glad, boy, because we sure heard it about Salvation Army. We couldn't even donate. So thank you for chiming in, Guy. Were there any jobs that you had while you were a member of Watchtower that you were counseled about, like maybe you shouldn't be doing that job? Was there any job that you had?
I used to work at Walmart, but other than that, I can't think of anything else.
Okay, I was just wondering if somebody pulled you aside and found something to pick on you about. Yeah, well, I remember you had trouble. I'm sorry?
Nobody pulled me back to the room and talked to me about working at Walmart and stuff. I used to know witnesses who worked at Walmart.
Did you hear any of them being counseled about their work hours or their days that they work?
I don't ever remember that per se.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, Guy. I hope you continue listening, and let's just stop the conversation right there. I do appreciate your listening in and sharing. I want to encourage anybody to think back over your time in the Watchtower, thinking of what type of job that you applied for. Maybe it wasn't the kind of job you wanted. Did anybody get counseled about the job that they had, or the hours that they had, or maybe days that they worked that they were told they should be doing something else to serve the organization? I don't know about you guys, but I was actually counseled for working and told that I should go on welfare, that that's what it was there for. And I'm like, what about the scripture that said if a man doesn't want to work, neither let him eat? because I believe in doing everything you can to support your family, not to take away from service to Jehovah, AKA we really know now that we were really supposed to be serving the Watchtower organization. They just used Jehovah so that we wouldn't catch on. But I remember having a very difficult time. There was one job that I was actually quite good at it. I used to run the portrait studio at Sears many years ago when they still had it. And yeah, I was really good. I had my manager quit, all my coworkers quit because it was so bad. It was so stressful, but I built up the business, and it was so good that well, thank you. I called corporate, and the highest I could go was the vice president of the entire company, which was in St. Louis, Missouri. And I would tell him what was wrong and what needed to be corrected and how I thought it should be done. And I used to really lay it on thick with this guy. About every 2 weeks, I was on the phone calling him. And believe it or not, I got a call from my district manager one day saying, Anne Marie, you're not going to believe this, but you got your studio. And I'm like, what are you saying? And they decided to redesign all of the studios exactly as I had said it should be, down to the color and shade of the carpet. And I'm like, oh my God, you're kidding. The thing is, I was good at my job, and I still went to all the meetings. I studied with my children. I went out in service. I prepared for all the meetings, and I still got talked to about how I shouldn't be doing what I was doing, mainly because I would have to get up in the middle of the Sunday meeting and run to work because I was the only one holding the studio together. And it's like, you know, they don't give you kudos for what you're doing. They find something to pick on you about, but yet they're not going to pay your bills. They're not going to pay your mortgage. You're not going to pay your car note. They're not going to put shoes on your children's feet. They're not going to put food in your cupboard. So I remember also, and I know Rick probably remembers this, way back, I remember in the 60s and 70s, many brothers from the podium were counseled that if it came down to their boss saying you have to work this day or that day or these days, when it was assembly time, you quit your job. You put, quote unquote, Jehovah first. Well, we know now it's put the organization first. How rude and unkind and unloving for an organization supposedly representing God, telling the head of a family whose responsibility it is to provide for his family to quit his job, his means of income and support for his family.
I understand that.
Got it. I'm not talking to you directly. Mute yourself. Please.
Sorry. I'll let you go.
No, you don't need to let me go. Just mute yourself. I am talking to everyone and anyone. Thank you, Guy. Please don't go. Just please understand. I'm not talking directly to you. I'm talking to everyone, you included. I want to know if anyone has any memories or stories or heard of anyone, what kind of job they had, if they lost jobs or were threatened with losing a job because it conflicted with what Watchtower was telling them. I do remember in my day, in the old days, women were not supposed to work. It was, I don't know, taboo. What, if she makes $1 on her own, is she somehow asserting herself? Is she asserting her husband's authority? It was just such garbage. But I do remember that the only two jobs that sisters in the congregation could have when they weren't being reprimanded for were house cleaning and babysitting. Those were the only two jobs. And that's sad. And I do remember the story of this one poor sister who was doing house cleaning. And you know how it is in the organization. All of your clients are supposed to be, as much as possible, all your clients are supposed to be fellow Watchtowerites. And there was this one family that this sister cleaned for, and she always let herself in with her key. And both of them were at work. The husband and wife would be at work, and she's at the home by herself. As always, she came once a week. And the brother of whose house she was cleaning came home, and he assaulted her. and she was terrified. She was terrified that her husband would find out. She was terrified anybody would find out. She was terrified the man's wife would find out. And she just tried to forget it ever happened and didn't say anything. Unfortunately, she became pregnant, and she knew it was his brother's child because her husband had had a vasectomy. So now she's terrified out of her mind. So she goes to her husband in terror and cries and tells him what happened. And thank God he was a wonderful brother, wonderful, loving husband. And he was so angry at what this brother had done to his wife. And now they're facing a pregnancy because of this assault. They went to the elders. The elders called the man who had done it. He denied it and denied it and denied it. And she kept saying, this is what he did. I'm not going to back down. Because they were saying, well, who's lying? Finally, the brother who had assaulted this poor sister admitted that he had done what he had done, only he said it was consensual. And they're like, why did you lie? And he's hanging his head and crying. And he's like, oh, I didn't want my wife to find out. I felt so bad. I was so ashamed. I didn't want to risk losing my marriage. And I know she felt bad, the woman that he had assaulted, because, I didn't want to take a chance of ruining her marriage. I was just hoping everything would work out. So this guy who assaulted this poor sister basically turned it around and said that he had come home for something that he had forgotten, and she had come on to him, and she had gotten him all excited, and they had had consensual sex. So now they're still calling this poor sister a liar, threatening her with being disfellowship. The poor brother whose wife was assaulted, it was a disgusting mess. And this is what happens. And I'm thinking, these poor sisters, a lot of them were doing house cleaning back then. And it's like, what do? You're putting yourself in a vulnerable situation. Babysitting other people's kids, it's the same thing. What if you don't have the mental and emotional wherewithal to be able to deal with kids crying and yelling and fighting and getting sick? And what if something happens? What if a kid falls and gets hurt, and then you're blamed and you're accused of child abuse or something? These are not the easiest jobs in the world to have, but they were menial, where you had to work really hard to make almost no money. Thank God they've changed a lot. I mean, I know my daughter-in-law has a really good job, but that's because she had great jobs and a lot of education and training way before she ever joined the Watchtower. But I know I was under pressure. Don't go to school. Don't do this. And like I said, I was even picked on for working at all. Well, why don't you just go on welfare? Well, that's what it's for. Does anybody want to share their time in Watchtower as far as their means of employment, how they were treated, the type of job that they took? And a lot of times the job that we did take
I've got a quick story.
Please do. Share, my brother.
Sure. My name is Eric, and it's not a big deal, but I was in the organization, born in fourth generation, and I got into auto body at a young age, and I became an auto body painter and did some start to finish work as well. When you're in auto body in mechanics, you have to have your own tools, and they're not cheap. Like one spray gun is like $750. I don't know what they cost today because I'm retired from it. But anyways, I had a problem with Watchtower. I don't find it a problem anymore. But I always liked marijuana since I was 16. I had medical marijuana prescribed from a doctor, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I had my father-in-law, who was a ministerial servant, and a couple of elders say maybe I should leave my field. And I said, there's no freaking way I'm leaving this field. And they're like, well, there's a lot of pot and drugs in that field. I'm like, it's everywhere. I'm like, so I go to another field and it's there too. Like, and I'm invested in this. There's no way I'm leaving this. And I thought I would add that to you. No, I stayed in it, and I became really good at what I did. And I got to paint Highline cars for dealerships, and I made some money at it, and what else was I going to do? And I made a good career out of it. So
You know what, Eric? I really appreciate your sharing that. Do you mind adding any details, like how old were you when you got into it? How did you get into it? Did you get into it before you were in Watchtower or while you were in Watchtower? And I am just like smiling that you stood up to this type of, they're always trying to control you. I'm surprised they don't monitor how you brush your teeth or get dressed in the morning or how you use the
Tell me about
toilet.
it. No kidding.
So how did you get into this, Eric?
Into auto body?
Yeah.
Or my uncle, he didn't do auto body. He did like this cheap little quick repair for auto dealerships, and I got my start in that, and I wasn't satisfied with that. So I started to teach myself, and then I became an apprentice for somebody, and he corrected the things I was doing wrong. And then I had one more apprentice at another job, and he finished my training. I mean, you never really finish training; you always learn. But that man, he was, you know what, this is a good story, actually. The man that finished my training, that told me some things I was doing wrong, he was an ex-Jehovah's Witness. He was disfellowshipped, and I was a witness at the time. And he goes, "Oh, you're a witness? You're not going to like me." And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "I'm disfellowshipped." And I was never that type of person, even when I was in the organization. I looked at him and just
Good
said,
for you.
"That doesn't matter." I said, "That doesn't matter to me at all." I said, "We worked together, and we ended up becoming friends." And I had him over for dinner. I don't know. I never really conformed to the disfellowshipping arrangement. I didn't make it known that I was hanging out with disfellowship people. No one wants to go through that with the elders. But my neighbor was disfellowshipped, and she said the same thing to me, and I treated her good. This organization destroys love. My family, they don't have any empathy because they're all in it. And I'm just like, this organization destroys love. I know I'm getting off topic, but
No. No. You know what, Eric? This is all tied into the whole point. They destroy love. I have never heard the organizations, though they treat us, put that way. And you know what else I noticed about your story? And I've heard this before, and I was the same way, Eric, that you weren't like that typical witness who's like, "Oh, you're disfellowshipped and shunning."
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do that. You saw your coworker as a human being, a person.
Yeah, and he ended up being a great companion and friend. And he's forever in my thoughts and prayers. We don't have connection anymore. I moved away, but he was a great man. And you know what? It's a shame how the organization treated him. They divided his family up. They're all separated, but the kids didn't take to it, thank goodness, and they followed the dad, not the mom.
Yeah. You know what I guess I wanted to say, and I'm so glad you were that way. I'm sure Rick was that way. I'm sure Susan was that way. I know I was that way.
My wife is that way. My wife was that way too. You know what she did? She went up to a disassociated person at the what's the memorial, and it was a friend of hers, and she said, "Wendy," and she gave her a big hug in front of everybody, and I'm like, damn, that's balls. But I'm proud of her.
I know you are.
We both never did it. We both never conformed to that because it didn't feel right, you know.
Well, because I think that we have real love in our heart, and love has nothing to do with shunning anyone. And what I'm noticing, just like you and your wife and others who did not really feel comfortable with turning their nose up at somebody or walking right past them with, staring straight ahead like they don't exist. I never quite felt that I fit in, that I was the witness I was supposed to be. I never really felt like I fit the mold, and I used to cry thinking, what's wrong with me? And I think what was wrong.
Have you been disfellowshipped?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
And
so
it wasn't even for a spiritual reason. Oh, yeah. I went from everybody loving me to the beginning of the meeting, even though I told everybody it was going to be announced. And the next thing I know,
and then boom,
I don't exist. I mean,
have you ever had anybody put like shield their hand over their eyes when you pass by?
No, what happened? Did that happen to you?
Yeah, that happened to me when I was the fellowship. I asked an elder, "Is your wife sitting here?" Because I was getting seats for my wife and I who were disfellowshipped, and he put his hand up to his eyes and moved his head. And I'm like, "What are you going to turn to stone? And you're an elder. You're supposed to be able to talk to me." I'm just asking who's sitting here. Isn't it ridiculous?
Yeah. It is absolutely ridiculous, and what's so sad is they don't see how ridiculous they are. Uh-oh, I got cut off. God damn it, I got cut off.
No, you're not cut off. You're on with us, Jean Marie. You didn't get cut off.
I hear you.
I thought I got cut off again. I am so sorry. It happens all the time. I'll hear a bloop bloop, and I'm like, oh no, thank you. God, I was so scared. No, I was in. Have you guys ever heard of Eric's Deli? Maybe it's only in California. It's a very, very popular deli, and it started in a small town in California. Anyway, I was in line, a very long line. There must have been about 50, 60 people in line during lunch hour, and I was near the back, and way up about 20, 30 people ahead of me was an elder and his wife, whom I had known very well. We were friends. And the wife was behind the husband. She was looking back, and all of a sudden she saw me. Her eyes widened in absolute horror, and she turned around, yanked on her husband's sleeve, and he turned around like, what? And she whispers in his ear. He turns around and looks back and sees me and gets a look on his face like, I'm not going to let you, hurt my wife. And he grabs her protectively while glaring at me and puts her in front of him. And I'm thinking, that is the saddest thing I've ever seen. I just looked at him with a little smile and shook my head like, wow, please tell me I was never like that. It is so sad. I don't ever remember being cruel like that to anyone. Wow. So I'm glad, Eric, mainly I'm really glad that you stayed with your job. Sound like you had a real talent for it. And your coworker did not treat you badly, and you didn't treat him badly. And how cool of him to tell you. He just assumed you were going to shun him. Well, you wouldn't like me because I'm disfellowship. And you proved him wrong. Because you're a good guy, Eric. Good for you. You probably made those angels smile.
I hope I did.
I know you did, my brother. I used to work at a bank, and everyone there at the bank, all the employees were all Christians. And this is before I understood what the Christian faith was all about. I just thought they were idiots because I was still believing the Watchtower indoctrination. But I do remember that 2 temp workers who would come in here and there were witnesses, not only witnesses, but they were witnesses that used to be in my old congregation. And I was like, okay, but to me, you're at work, you're at work. This is professionalism. There's nothing to do with personal. And I found out from a fellow coworker that these 2 witnesses were gossiping about me in the back room. As soon as I had a chance, one of them in particular, as soon as I got a chance, I went back into the back room and just laid all her you-know-what there, told her off big time. Because you know what? I am so glad that out of Watchtower, I learned that it is okay and emotionally healthy to be assertive, stand up for yourself, and, set your boundaries and let somebody know face to face, not behind their back, what's okay and what is not okay, what you will accept and what you will not accept. And I said, I had better not hear anything about you saying anything about me again. And she never came back. That lady used to, whenever she was temping, her husband would be in service and come into the bank to use the employee's bathroom. Just little, and I knew him. He was an elder from my old congregation. It was hilarious. Anyway, anybody have any
that we all go through? But I'll let someone else comment.
Well, nobody's stopping anyone. Is there anyone who would like to share any story related to work while in the Watchtower? Did you lose your job? Did you take a job you didn't want? Go ahead. All right.
I am ready.
Okay. Yeah.
Who's up?
And then the brother after you. Go ahead, dear. Hi, Rich.
Hello.
Go ahead. Somebody talk.
All right, Anne-Marie, thank you. I've been enjoying your program. I had a situation many, many years ago, about 35 years ago, in the Watchtower. I was a electronic technician working for Wang Laboratories, and Saturday was my time and a half day. So my former wife used to record all the assemblies, and then I would take it to work the next day, and I could play the whole program back at my workbench. I could listen to the whole thing, so I didn't miss anything. So one of the elders come up to me and said, we keep missing you at those circuit conventions and so forth. I said, well, I took them all in. I said, I listened to every word of it. And he said, well, the book of Hebrews says, do not forsake the gathering of yourself together. And I said, well, when the book of Hebrews was written, there was no such thing as recording device. And he just looked at me like, how dare you talk to me like that? I'm protecting you. I'm guiding your soul and into the new system, and you're fighting me. And he just didn't like it. But I'll tell you, it's a funny thing. People were jealous that I owned a big house and I had a new car. They were jealous of all that. And one of the brothers said, well, you don't have to work all that overtime. Well, I had a nice house. I was raising boys, and they need room to space out. The other was telling me that, had a baby of his own, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. Now, I don't think that that's healthy to raise a child like that. I'm sure they got a 2-bedroom down the road, but still, they just like, do not forsake the gathering yourselves together. Well, you know what? I go to the Kingdom Hall as much as I possibly can. And that overtime, that time and a half is how I survived. I could not have survived on just my salary alone, having a house and a car and all that stuff. So that's my little story, Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Well, no, Rich, I'm really glad that you shared that and that you had the cojones to stand up to this person who was basically operating out of ego and jealousy. And you took responsibility because as the man and the head of the house and the husband and the father and the provider, you did what you had to do to shoulder your responsibility. And if somebody doesn't like it, well, let me see your checkbook and let me see you pay my bills. Good for you. Anybody else want to comment on what anybody want to share or comment on what Rich shared? Go ahead.
Anne-Marie, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine, my dear.
Okay, awesome. I just saying, I still am in the car. So when I was a kid coming up, of course, all of the career options were go to Bethel and Pioneer and all of that. Well, I wasn't going to do Pioneer, and that seemed to me not to do anything I wanted to do. So I figured I'd go to Bethel. Didn't make it to Bethel, so the sister got me a job working at a bank. It was the most boring, mind-numbing job ever. And I literally quit one day, and I took a train to a college campus and signed up that day to start school the following semester. My mother, the mother who raised me, who was a witness, she one day to the next changed how she felt about me going to school. My dad, who was not a witness, he was ecstatic. So, long story short, finished school. The second job out of school involved a lot of traveling, and I took that job deliberately. I'm going to back up just a little bit. This elder, who was the worst human being I've encountered thus far in my life, these two particular elders, did nothing but harass everybody that they could, including me, but only to a point because, again, my dad was not a witness, and they were afraid of him. And he said to me, he said, you'll never be used because you went against society by going to school. And as long as I was at that congregation, I never qualified to serve as a ministerial servant, and I'm sure it went back to that. Anyway, fast forward ahead, as I said, to my second job, and involved a lot of traveling. I got to go to all the cities, all the states rather, in the United States that I wanted to and get to know them pretty well,
Yeah.
unlike most witnesses who really never go anywhere. And yeah, I definitely caught flack. There was definitely always some comment about brothers that need to qualify, but they're selfish because they're doing other things and this and that and the other and so forth and so on. But just like you said, I felt like you don't pay my bills, you don't live my life, you're not there for me. So why should I care what you think? And then when I would be around these brothers, I learned that they were not intelligent, they were not well read, they really didn't even know the Bible. All they knew was what Watchtower told them. So when we would have conversations, if you just go by the Bible, you can really kind of shut them down. So for that reason, I'm sure that they hated me. From a work perspective, definitely took jobs where I wasn't at all the meetings, and I definitely caught flack for it.
Well, good for you. If I had a gold star and an award, I'd be giving it to you, my brother. Good for you. Wow. Brother Quejones, I am proud of you. So how long did you go to school?
Well, this was a 3-year degree, but it was an accelerated program, so I guess it would have been 4 years, but because it was accelerated, it was 3. And I went full time. So
yeah,
I went full time. So I either worked during the day and then went to school, or went to school during the day and I worked in the evenings. But I basically said, nope, I've got to take care of myself. Nobody's going to do that for me. And it wasn't even just about the taking care of yourself, Anne Marie. It was about the intellectual stimulation. I realized I was just dying. There is no intellectual stimulation in this organization. There just isn't. It is so boring. Just mind-numbingly boring. Just going over in just what is the phrase? An echo chamber. Just everybody saying the exact same thing. No independent thought of any kind. And I was at the point I could have just jumped out of a window. Like, I cannot take it.
You just didn't want to stay in kindergarten, you bad Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah. You'd be a 99-year-old in kindergarten. That's exactly right. In the theocratic ministry school that you never graduate. How crazy that is.
It was crazy. No wonder we needed to leave. I mean, my goodness. Well, I am proud of you. I love these kind of stories. I wish I had had half of your sense because, I wanted to go to school. Go ahead, dear.
I just wish that I had left much sooner, because it's so obvious now, what this organization was. And because somebody asked me, what caused you to wake up, but it wasn't one single thing. I've always seen the dots. I just never connected them. And even now, there'll be times when I'll be, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. I think I missed something. You're a little bit muffled. Did you say you had always seen the something? You saw something?
Yeah, I was saying I had always seen the dots, the individual dots of things that didn't make sense in the organization, but I never connected them together. That's what I was saying. So for me, in terms of waking up, it wasn't like one good thing. I've seen all these dots, but finally I just connected them together, and I was like, yeah, I think you knew this was a cult way back when you were a teenager. You knew this doctrine was flip-flopping way back in the 80s.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was just the lack of intellectual stimulation. I just couldn't take it.
Isn't it a shame that God would give us a brain and then have his representatives tell you that you can't use it or else you're being disloyal to Jehovah?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Anne-Marie, and there really needs to be something said, and maybe I'll have to be the one to say it. But really, the African American community, the African community, people of color, that community, it's been a double blow to us as being witnesses, because for all of us that should have been going to school, getting jobs that pay, trying to build wealth for our families, instead of doing that, we sacrificed all that time to Watchtower. Really did a disservice to ourselves.
That's so messed up. It's really, and it's one of the things I get really angry about, so I have to just
sort of, take my lumps and move on. But for all of us, like I listened to Gilbert, what an intelligent person. Who knows what he could have been doing had he not wasted time, being a Jehovah's Witness. And so it's really a disservice to us. But in any event, the only good thing I guess we could say is that we got out of it.
Thank God. Thank God. Do you mind if I call you something? Do you mind giving a name or any kind of name, just like a?
Yeah, my name is Stephen. I've called into Mr. Farron's show before. I don't know if I've necessarily called into their show before, but I tend to listen every single Saturday, a little bit of Sunday as well. But my name is Stephen.
Well, Stephen, I am so glad you chimed in because you have me smiling over here because, it's like you're supposed to be this exemplary example. You're supposed to have a 4-door vehicle, supposed to be clean and in good repair.
Mm-hmm.
They don't tell you how you're supposed to pay for it. You're supposed to have nice suits and be well groomed, which means you got to pay for those haircuts. But they never connect the dots of it costs money and you got to work for the money. It's not going to fall down like manna from heaven. Hello. They want you to be subservient. They want you to be subservient, submissive, obedient. Yes, Brother Elder. I understand, Brother Elder. I'll work on that, Brother Elder. And hang your head.
Exactly right.
It's like, oh my God. I don't know how we put up with the BS. It's like you can smell dog doo-doo everywhere, but you can't pinpoint where it is. So you think something's wrong with you.
And to the point that you just made, I was listening to somebody today, and they were talking about whether Jehovah's Witnesses were a cult. And I was thinking to myself, if you were a Jehovah's Witness and you were going full throttle, doing it their way, that means that they literally controlled every facet of your life.
Yes.
From the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed. I remember this brother was saying that when he got up, he would immediately read the text. Then he would go and read the full Watchtower article that the text came out of. Then he'd go to work. And then at lunchtime, he would go and separate from someone else, and he'd read something, quote unquote, theocratic. And then, of course, the weekly schedule of studying for the meetings and then being at the meetings and then going somewhere in the weekend. Every facet of your life, what kind of clothes you can wear and not wear, and who you can associate and not associate, who you can date, who you can marry, the types of jobs, as we're talking about now, that you can take or not take, how much time you can spend on recreation, what can that recreation be? Every facet of what kind of sex you can have with your mate. Every aspect of your life. And you just think to yourself, I cannot believe that I allowed somebody to tell me and direct me in all these areas of my life. Well, we did.
So we know it was literally a mind control cult. And I encourage everyone, I'm always thinking of the PIMQs in the Watchtower, the ones who are physically in, but mentally, like you, like I, like all of us, mentally we're questioning. They're not quite, they don't know, they're not at the point where they know Watchtower is full of BS and they're a cult. They're mentally just questioning and almost feeling afraid that they're questioning the PIMQs. And I always want to encourage them, if they are afraid, to investigate Watchtower, to see that what we are saying is not just disgruntled apostates who couldn't live up to Jehovah's standards. I mean, those Watchtowerites have something to say about us, anything. But if they could just look up what makes a cult, and if they could look up specifically the BITE model, BITE, which is an acronym for behavioral control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And if you go to YouTube and look up BITE model, it gives the 5 basic tools that all cults use to indoctrinate and control their members, and it gives examples of each and every mind control tool. And you have to be able to see that Watchtower is exactly according to BITE model, as all cults are. They might have different names for the tools. They might have different methods with the tools, but they're all the same basic tools. They not only completely take over your mind, but part of the programming is to keep reinforcing your own indoctrination. That's why they make sure you're going out in service. A lot of people say, oh, keep track of your time. Why? Because your time that you report is the barometer of how loyal you are to the Watchtower. They
exactly
know
right.
when your time is slipping, oh, looks like we have a potential apostate on our hands. Go ahead, Stefan.
No, everything you said is exactly right. And I tell people all the time, there is only one playbook that these cults and high control groups use. There's only one playbook. They all use the exact same playbook. They just emphasize certain things, de-emphasize certain things, turn it up over here, ignore this over there. But there's only one playbook for how you manipulate the emotions and the thought process of a human being. And they all use the same governments, multi-level marketing groups, cults of all kinds, political cults, religious cults, sex cults, whatever it is, all the way down to just a domestic relationship, a one-on-one domestic relationship. They use the exact same techniques because there's only one playbook, as you just said.
Yeah, you're so right, Stefan. And just like in the days of the Nazi regime, the Third Reich, they all down to the part where they report on each other, even if it's their own mate, their own husband, their own father, their own mother, their own grandparents, their own children reporting on their parents. It is a sad, sad, scary thing. And it's sad, even more so to me, is that we believe that. I mean, I personally, I can just say I believed it. I remember going to an elder freaking out because my Jehovah's Witness brother was in town and was at that time visiting my disfellowshipped mother. And I was terrified that somehow her demons would get on my brother and infect him. And I'm like, oh, brother, what should I do, brother? How do I get him out of there? Like I had to go rescue my brother from our wicked mother. And our mother is the most loving, kind, sweet woman you would ever want to meet. But because she was disfellowshipped, now she's this evil demon. And I remember the elder even looking at me saying, but Anne Marie, she's your mother. And I'm like, but she's disfellowshipped. And he said, well, is she casting spells? Is she trying to turn your brother against the truth? And I'm like, no, but. And he's like, but that's how insanely indoctrinated I was. I was to the T a completely indoctrinated, fully programmed Watchtower, right? Like a Watchtower drone with all my programming intact. Go ahead.
Well, what I say is that you give hope to those of us who have family and friends that are fully indoctrinated, that we are really probably thinking in the back of our minds, this person is never going to wake up. But someone like you gives us hope that maybe they will wake up at some point and come out of that indoctrination.
Well, I hope so, Stefan. You know, I used to literally sit in the meeting so depressed and so suicidal. Literally, I remember praying to God to not let me wake up the next morning because I was so depressed. But I didn't want to allow Satan to make me leave Jehovah. That's how the programming taught me. When the whole time my spirit kept telling me, get out, get out, get out. And I thought it was Satan. And I realize now, you know, it wasn't. It was down deep in my soul. I knew this was a bunch of garbage, but I was fighting against it. I was a kid, and I knew at 13 something was wrong. And when we moved to a new congregation at 13, and they were just stunk up snobs. That's the best way I can describe these people. And I had come from a congregation, they were poor, but I came from a congregation that was so loving and so sweet, and I had no qualms about being in the organization. I just assumed any hardship was due to Satan, right? And then we moved to this other congregation, and I could not believe the snobbery. And then at 14, I thought, I'm leaving. I don't care. And at 15, I made up my mind. I didn't care who did what to me. I was never going to step foot in another thing now as long as I live. But I got talked into going back because God's going to destroy you and your children. And so I thought, oh, wow. Yeah, I believed it because that ingrained indoctrination was so deep in my soul that they convinced me. And then I literally just, any little inkling of don't listen to them, don't listen to them, don't go to the Kingdom Hall, don't listen to them, get out, don't talk to them. It's Satan, it's Satan, it's Satan. So the more I felt I shouldn't be there, the more I thought I have to fight against Satan. So the thing is that this is how deep this indoctrination is. To question Jehovah. To not listen is to not listen to Jehovah. To not obey is to not obey Jehovah. They turn everything into, if you don't obey them, you're doing it against Jehovah. So I always tell people, if every time you hear organization, governing body, faithful slave, it's not Jehovah. Every time you hear Jehovah, put in Watchtower leaders, Watchtower leaders, Watchtower leaders. They're the ones that are telling you, you better this and you better not that or else. And then they hold your family hostage. They use emotional blackmail to control you, and they control you with guilt, shame, and fear. Oh, what a terrible thing. You could be serving Jehovah for 40 years faithfully, but just one stupid mistake. Oh, you could lose it all and die at Armageddon. How is that good news?
It isn't. That's why if you ever think about the hypocrisy of Watchtower, like they talk, oh, the ministry, you have to go out in the ministry. But do you think they're going to go out in the ministry and tell somebody that, hey, look, we're the only organization on the planet that's going to survive Armageddon. If you're not with us, you're going to die. No, they don't tell people that. They don't tell people all the things that once you become a witness, well, oh, you know, you can't do this now. Oh, you know, you can't associate with your own family, you know, now. Oh, you know that if one of you ever decides you don't want to be a witness anymore, that maybe your family's not going to talk to you, or maybe your husband will leave you, or maybe your wife will leave you, or your kids won't. They don't tell people all the craziness about this organization when you're out in the ministry. Not until you join. Then you find these things out, and then it's kind of too late. You're stuck in that web.
Exactly. I was just telling my husband, come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. They get you with their sweet honey and their reasonable words. I mean, we should know better. Just think back in the Garden of Eden when the snake said to Eve, is it really so that God has said you must not eat of the tree of good and evil? Oh, knowledge of good and bad? So, you know, they come across as so reasonable. They sucked you in, and what they're doing is they're using this first step of mind control. Your guard is down because they're so nice and so reasonable and so smooth, and they make so much sense. And they're slowly twisting you. Just follow the yellow brick road and all your problems will be solved. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Oh, pay attention. Don't pay attention to that man. I am the great and powerful Oz. I'm the great and powerful Watchtower. And you are, and it's like too late. You're too late. And then at the thought of leaving, it's like, how are you going to get out? Go ahead, dear. Sorry. Go ahead.
Can I add to the rant? This is Joe.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
I love hearing you all. You know, I had the whatever of having a 4-year business degree, and business is business, and Watchtower is business. With marketing, you know, marketers develop a scam basically to convince people why they need something, and it appeals to them in a deep way, and it works for a while, but it may not really fit them. It just works, and so they accept it. Well, after a while, people kind of get wise to it and realize, that thing isn't everything they said it was. It's really a bunch of BS. we don't buy it anymore. Well, by that time, they're wise enough to know that they've got to come up with another model. And not only that, they also know that there's going to be a new market of people. There's going to be a new batch of younger ones coming along. So what I would say is, let's be watchful to the new marketing ploy that they have, and be aware of the fact that there are younger people that are going to be scammed into it. And we're even watching that come about right now with the way they're using celebrities like Serena and whoever else to appeal to a younger crowd, a younger that doesn't really care about maybe the things we cared about. They're onto it. They are so onto it. In the meantime, we're wise to it, but they're not. So what I'm kind of concerned about is those up and coming ones that need to be warned. And also the ones that are still in, like my family, that need to be brought up to speed, if that may be the case. So we need to look ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The scary thing is once we wake up and we see everything so clearly. I'm sorry, did somebody want to comment? Once we see everything clearly, so many of us, I know I have been, and I've heard others also, is what can we do to wake our family up? I mean, why can't they see? What scripture can we show them? What Watchtower can we show them? And it's like there's no magic bullet. There's just no magic bullet. Everybody has their own time. Randy Waters said it so well. He said, everybody has their own time. And until they're ready, until they want to wake up, until they want to wake up, until their feelings deep down that something isn't right, and they can't swallow it down anymore with, well, they're just imperfect men. Well, Jehovah will take care of it. I just have to stay faithful. How many times can you still use the same excuse? You just have to. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, how many times can you use that same excuse? I think one tactic that I've been trying, at least with a family member, is just the things that I know are causing cognitive dissonance, and just politely asking a question. So like when Stephen Lett made the statement about babies being enemies of God, look at that little enemy of God. This particular family member is a grandmother. And I said, do you view your grandchildren as little devils, as little enemies of God? Now, of course, I already know the answer is no. What grandmother views their grandchild that way? And so I asked the question, how do you think that this is how God views it? Or is this a human being that's giving their own opinion? What is it? That's how I go about it. Because I cannot imagine a person not having cognitive dissonance over things like that when these guys make these crazy, insane comments. And I just asked, well, how do you feel about it? Do you agree with that? Yeah. Where is this coming from? Do you think God agrees with it? What is going on here? And of course they're not going to tell you what they really think, but more importantly, they are thinking about it. They're not going to share what their innermost thoughts are with you and I, but they can't help but think about that.
No doubt. This is why, like I said, I always think about the pin cues, the ones who are physically in, they're still faithful, but deep down in their mind, their heart, they're questioning. And it's a scary thing to believe something, but there are questions, this feeling that something's wrong, something just doesn't feel right. And you almost feel scared because, like you said, causes cognitive dissonance. This is when your programming, it's almost causing a static in your programming, like the old pinball machines when it couldn't handle anymore, it's tilt. Remember what tilt meant? Go ahead.
If I could say, and I think you're onto the fact that fear immobilizes people if they don't know how to react. And no one has been, and Jehovah's people, or whoever's people they are not taught to react to the kind of little attacks and assaults that they give. When just like a child who is assaulted in a sexual way, they have no idea how to react. They're totally scared.
Right.
They're immobilized. They don't. It's the same way with any adults in the organization. These governing, whatever they are, know exactly what they're doing. They have people 10 times smarter than them in a psychological way that know how to do things that get people like us to be in fear and mobilized. What do I do now? Well, how do I refute that? Well, what do I say to that? And so they
speak up, please.
Yes, go ahead. Anybody want to comment? Go ahead, sweetie. We're getting short on time. Go ahead. Don't be shy. Go ahead.
I'm listening.
There was another thing, something that you had mentioned, Anne Marie, that made me think about how the organization is not truthful. And I was thinking about from the term of a perspective of a Bible study. It's very interesting when if you're studying with the Bible, you're encouraged that if a person asks you a question or they bring up an objection, that you're to constantly sort of push that down and say, listen, let's just get through the book. We don't want to get distracted and go all over the place and never accomplish anything. Let's get through the book. And what you're really doing is you're pushing that person's questions, concerns, doubts down, hoping that the indoctrination will take such that it won't matter how they felt about that, and they'll still become a Jehovah's Witness anyway. And that's one of the things that appalls me about this organization, how dishonest they really are.
Well, they're successful in grooming the compliant individual. That's exactly what that
Correct.
Does. It grooms.
Correct. Hey, Joe, I don't know if you remember me. This is Stefan. You and I had called in to the sixth string at the exec. It's great to talk to you. Yes.
Yes, great to hear you.
You as well. And I enjoyed your video. I enjoyed you and the wife in your video with the redhead lady. I can't remember her name. Sorry. Wendy Renee. There you go. There you go.
She made us look good.
Yeah. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you just gave me something to really think about, which is how do we appeal to these young ones? Because I knew that when COVID struck and they were doing the meetings from remotely, that they were going to be losing people.
Yeah.
And then I said to myself, when COVID is finally over, they are going to have to turn this indoctrination up to a level that's never been to before in order to keep the people that they have and maybe get a few more. So to your point, which is how do we save these young? Because if you've been around this organization for more than maybe 15 years, you cannot help but see this is not the same organization. We never saw the governing body. Thank God. Now we did, and good Lord. We've never heard this organization constantly pandering for money the way that they do now. I don't know if you heard. I don't know if you heard. They've been pandering for money to build this Disney World thing that they're trying to build. But did you hear on the news either last week or the week before that they just bought the old Geico headquarters for somewhere between $23 and $27 million?
Yeah. One of the friends is right around there, and they told us about it.
Yeah. Now, was that published on Watchtower? Was that in their little news area of their website? No, I guarantee you it wasn't. But they'll still go to the friends and pander for money to go and build this Disney World thing that they want to do. And I'm just so disgusted with these people that I just can't even think straight. But I just knew, going back to your point, that they were going to turn this indoctrination up to a level that's unprecedented to try to hold on to what they have. And to your point, how do we get young ones out of that? And that's something we really need to give pause to.
Personally, what we're doing, every chance we get, we ask people, do they know any Jehovah's Witnesses? And then we go into a little bit of the dissertation.
Okay.
And it's very interesting.
What Watchtower is doing to counteract or combat against that very thing with the young ones is now they're looking to encourage and recruit, just like Hitler did, the young men, even as young as 12 years old to groom them to be company men, just like Hitler did in the Third Reich, remember?
It'll work. Yes. Yeah, it'll work. I was thinking about that when they made the announcement, and Mr. Freeman brought it out to all of us about possibly mentoring the ministerial servants in their 20s to be elders. That lets you know two things. One, they are literally scraping the bottom of the barrel when you have to go find a 20-year-old to be an elder. Under no circumstances in any society is somebody in their 20s considered an elder. I mean, that is such a disrespectful slap in the face to say to somebody that you are on par at 20, 23, 24 with somebody who's 60, 70, 80 years of life. And you guys are somehow on par. Insane.
They may give them another name.
Well, you know, the Mormon church makes their elders starting at 18. But then again, a lot of them are really sweet and loving. But I've spoken to many of these quote unquote elders from the Mormon church who are very young, but they don't have the arrogance and the egotism that they do in Watchtower. But I do believe that Watchtower is taking notes and been taking notes and following patterns of Hitler and Mormonism and Seventh-day Adventists. They do whatever will work to serve their agenda.
That's exactly.
What would help? Oh, I shouldn't give ideas to help the Watchtower, but the Mormons, they encourage their young people to go to college and extend their education. And the Mormon church, during the COVID parts that everybody else was losing their jobs, they were one of the top organizations / cults that, religions that didn't have any problem financially through that. But it's because their people are trained well and educated. Right. And
what you have to remember is the education that they're going to get is from their own people. So if I'm a Mormon, I'm going to be going to BYU. I'm not going to be going to, University of Chicago, University of Pennsylvania, whatever it is, where I'm going to get an education and they're going to teach me critical thinking. They're going to teach me psychology. They're going to teach me philosophy. No, they're getting an education, a skill steeped in their religion. Now, Watchtower doesn't have that, and they're never going to have that. And that's why the only play they have with respect to that is to either keep pushing no education, or you just go get some sort of a trade or something like that. They don't want you to be exposed to those other things. So yes, the Mormons and some of these other groups do promote education, but it's still education within their controlled environment. And that still just reinforces and keeps their people in line.
Yeah, but at least their people do go out and make very good money. It might be a Mormon education, but they learn enough skills to go out and have a major company. I mean, that's one thing. But I've had a lot of the kids. Well, I call them kids, and they call themselves elder so and so. And when they come to my door and they tell me that, well, they're elder more or something, I say, you're not my elder, and I'm not going to call you elder. What is your actual name? And then I'll, then I'll be nice. I'm nice the whole time, though. But the Watchtower is total patriarchal, and actually the Mormons are too. And I know when I signed up to go to college after I got married and had 2 children, got divorced, and had to support my own family. I signed up to go to college and started, and elders called me to the back room and told me I wasn't setting a good example for the younger sisters. And I just told them, well, I have a family to support, and I'm by myself. And I said, that's fine with me. I won't go. So, which one of y'all want to support us? Me and my kids. and they asked me to step out of the room for about 3 minutes is what it took, maybe. And I went, then they called me back in the room and they said, well, we think in this case, you can go ahead and go to college. That'll be fine. In other words, none of them wanted to support me and my kids, you know. And when you put it, right, when you put it back on them, they're like, oh, you know, you're fine, everything's fine. Anyway, that was my
There was a sister in the last congregation that I attended that fell on hard times. She was married to someone who didn't want to work and this and that. So they lost their house, moved into an apartment, lost the apartment, and she became homeless. And when I found out about it, that was whatever the N acronym is, and I offered my house. Well, you can't have a woman living in your house that you're not married to and this and that and the other. I said, okay. So the next thing I know, I find out she's in a shelter. No witnesses offered their house, offered their home for her to stand. None of the quote unquote elders or the ministerial servants, all of whom were married, nobody offered their home. So she wound up in a shelter with 4 children of various ages. The boys were teenagers, but on down to maybe like 10, a set of twins that were 10, in a shelter. No, and it's just amazing. And it's something Anne Marie mentioned this. She got me on the roll now. She probably wished she didn't, but she got me on the roll now. And when you're supposed to show love, the love that they constantly talk about in all these meetings, all love our organization, we just love each other to death. But I've never seen it fail that when a person goes through a difficult circumstance, there is nobody there. No elder came to the rescue. No ministerial servant came to the rescue. No pioneer. Nobody even opened their house and let this woman go and live in a shelter with 4 kids. And I was just shocked. And you could tell she was going through such difficult times. She must have lost so much weight towards the end. She was almost unrecognizable. The children looked ragged. And, you know, I did the best that I could in terms of trying to be encouraging and offer money and things of that nature. But I just thought to myself, all of this BS, excuse my French, that we're taught about love and Jehovah will be there for you and all of this stuff. And I've never seen it fail where it's nothing to it. It's empty promises. Just like Anne Marie said, it's just a man behind the curtains operating something. There is nothing to it.
Hey guys, I need to check in with Rick because we're a little bit over time. Rick, how are we doing?
Well, what we got here, Anne Marie, we do have a lot of callers coming in tonight. Still looks like a lot still want to talk. So why don't we keep it going for another 5 or 10 minutes or so, and I'll come in and let you know, okay?
Thank you so much, my brother. Anybody want to comment on the conversation so far? You have me listening real well. Any comments on attitudes, how it was being subservient in the Watchtower, jobs and employment situation? Star 6.
Yeah, Marie, just another quick thought. Kind of a follow-up. How are you doing? I just got to follow up on what I was saying a little while ago. The elders used to call me and say, Sister so-and-so needs groceries, a sister, you know, that type of thing. And I'd always, you know, come up with some money for them. And the craziness of it is that, you know, someone pulls me aside, says you shouldn't be working overtime, yet they certainly appreciate the donations to the Kingdom Hall and the donation to the brothers and sisters that are having a hard time. Oh, just another quick thought. You know, in the Truth book and the Paradise Earth book, which brought a lot of us into the cult, they never tell us about judicial committees or disfellowshipping. They leave that out. You get, you know, the spider to the fly. You know, till they get you in the web, then they throw all that stuff on you. They don't tell you about that in advance. Thank you.
Wow, thank you.
May I add something to what Joe just said?
Yes, you have the floor.
Joe, I really appreciate what you just said, because one of the other things they do say, I remember somebody asking me, the scholarship, what is that? And of course, the patent response is if it's an action that's taken against a person who is an unrepentant sinner. But we all know from being in the organization any length of time that you can and will be disfellowshipped for anything. They will invent a reason. They will then go on the scripture in the Bible, pull out any kind of scripture that they feel like fits why you're being disfellowshipped, and you'll be disfellowshipped. But we don't tell people that.
No, we don't. And we don't tell people that if you get hauled before a judicial committee, and isn't it interesting as a side thought, the loving shepherds who are looking after your souls, the ones who we don't want to grieve them because they're working so hard to look out for your souls. Isn't it interesting that in reality, they really are those judicial committee elders who will take you in the back room behind closed doors and hold court over you and condemn you and judge you and punish you. You are not allowed to have any defense. You're not allowed to have any support. You're not allowed to have anyone speak for you. You're not allowed counsel. Nothing. And whatever happens, whatever they did to you, whatever they said to you behind those closed doors, nobody knows. Nobody knows. And it's really sad that a rape victim and a child molestation victim is way more apt to be disfellowshipped than a pedophile in the Watchtower.
That's true. That's true.
And, you know, going along with that exact thought, in one of the, in the elder's manual that they had back in 2000, when my dad died, the first thing I did was go to his book bag to get his Bible because I wanted to keep it. And I accidentally ran upon the elder's manual that said private, not for any, you know, ministerial servant or publisher, you know, to read. So, well, you know, that meant I was going to read it. And I was shocked because it was talking about that if a man committed bestiality, it was not important to tell his wife about it because or if he had sex with another man, that it was in adultery. It wasn't adultery because adultery was between a man and a woman. So unless he had sex with another woman, it wasn't considered adultery. And I was just kind of floored by that. And also it said that, you know, if a man needed to talk to the elders about something he had done, his wife was not allowed in to hear, you know, anything about him. But if it was the wife that had done something, it was entirely appropriate and recommended that her husband sit in on the meetings, you know, with the committee with her. And I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, a committee is 3 men and then a woman's husband. And like if she had committed adultery, she would have to disclose the details in front of 4 men sitting there that are, you know, like thinking, oh, this is my wife, you know, and like you said, well, a woman, period, is just more likely to get this fellowship. I don't know if they do public reproof or not, but I know that when my father-in-law raped me, it took me 5 years and to go and talk to the elders about it. And my committee was just 3 random brothers, and he went to a different congregation, and his committee was his fleshly brother and his brother-in-law and one other brother. And that wasn't a I don't think he was related unless he was his cousin or something. But anyway, my father-in-law didn't get any discipline. And he was technically sort of like a pedophile because it happened the time I was 16 and 19. But I got publicly reproved because they said I didn't fight enough or scream loud enough. But usually, if you're being raped by somebody that close to you, you're kind of in shock and you don't know what to do, you know. But honestly, talking to a woman talking to a committee about that, they're doing, those elders, they might say they don't look at porn and all that stuff, but it is nothing but a freaking porn show to them because of the horrible details they ask you about what's going on. It's not even appropriate for any conversation. But you're already humiliated enough, and then you go to them for comfort and help. And it's like wearing the letter A, you know, like the scarlet letter, and you haven't even done anything wrong. The man has, but they still, I was in between the ages of his daughter, and he did that to me, and I kept telling him my daddy never touched me like this, and he would do it in front of his daughters and his wife. So why was anybody surprised when after 5 years of enduring that mess, you know, how I couldn't finally just, I mean, I was scared because he had told me that he was going to do some really bad things if I exposed what he was doing. And honestly, even my husband, when I told him, he didn't know what to do because that was his dad, you know, when we were both just kids, really, you know, and I used to get mad because my husband didn't protect me, but then I thought he probably was in shock too that his dad would do something like that. But anyway, that was, and he did do what he said he was going to do, one of the bad things. And that was he had the gall to tell them I seduced him. And I was terrified. And that's how things work out sometimes. And the next week, he was given a talk. And the next week, I couldn't even give a comment. I had restrictions for 2 years. Anyway, that's all.
No, I'm glad you shared that because that is, and this is sadly evident of so many incidences of how rape victims and sexual molestation victims are treated in the Watchtower. Not only are the victims punished and shamed and condemned and ridiculed and humiliated, but when they put them through the sessions, like Debbie alluded to, the horrible questionings that they go through, that they're put through, who touched who, where, why didn't, who didn't, did you have an orgasm, blah, 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 how many times? I call it theocratic pornography because it sure does seem they get off on it. It is disgusting. They control, as has been brought out so many times, everything. This is not God's anything. Anybody want to comment? We're running low.
Well, I think we're probably going to end it right there. And we got one more comment, then we're going to go to the news. Yep.
Yeah.
I'd
Thank
like
you,
to
Rick.
say
Real
that-
quick.
I'd like to just say that it's so important that this culture of Watchtower has to be articulated, and it has to be made known to people right around us.
Well, I want to thank
One
everyone
more
for
quick
coming in.
thought.
And thank you, Debbie. Go ahead. Hurry up, please.
I was just gonna say what you were alluding to about what you had to go through, but going through a committee session where they're asking you such horrible questions is like being raped again, only by 3 men at that time, because you can literally see them almost just like you said, getting off on it. And it is like being raped
Good
3-4
point.
men.
Okay, thank you so much, Debbie. Thank everyone for your comments and for coming in. And let's say thank you to Rick for giving us extra time. Let's get on to the next show. Thank you, Rick.
Well, thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank all the callers, too, for calling in tonight. Lots on the telephone line. So anyways, we're glad you're with us tonight, and that was Anne-Marie's program, Touched by the Tentacles of the Watchtower. Well, we're going to another broadcast right now. We're going to JW World News. That's the news the Watchtower doesn't want us talking about, but we do. We talk about it every Saturday night and every other Sunday. So let's go on to the news. Now, don't go anywhere. Stay on this YouTube channel, and you'll be able to pick up on the news here very shortly. So let's end this broadcast right now, and we'll go to JW